Agenda, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented from January 11th, 2016? Councilor Ross, Councilor Thompson, all in favor? So carried. May I have a motion to adopt the December 14th, 2000 Committee of the Whole minutes as presented? Councilor Thompson, Councilor Hammond, all in favor? So carried. Again, I have a motion to adopt the December 14th, 2015 regular meeting minutes as presented. Councilor Ross, Councilor Hammond.
I have one amendment
Amendment.
to the minutes. That's on page 18 of our agenda. And it is under information items, the second paragraph. And it should be bring forward, not break, the last line.
Oh, you're not gonna write it forward?
Huh?
You're not gonna write it?
No, I was just thinking it.
So may I have a motion to adopt the amended minutes as presented? Councilor Cutler, Councilor Hammond, all in favor? So carried.
Not just mine.
Lights on, and everybody's home.
My priority.
We're gonna fix, we're gonna fix.
All right.
You can't put it
Under unfinished business.
No, we've got the December 17th.
Wait a minute, did we do December?
No,
Sorry.
no.
Okay. All right, they have a motion for council to adopt the December 17th special to go in camera minutes as presented. Councilor Ross, Councilor Hammond. All in favor? So carried. Now, let's go to the unfinished business.
Later?
Want to put in the later?
We've
Already
already-
adopted.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
I'm
adopted
sorry.
the agenda.
We were gonna discuss the energy rate.
Did you do your report?
Okay. During council reports? Everybody know?
Yeah. All right, under unfinished business, subject matter, group of regional tourism accommodators and nonprofit societies requesting a letter of support for the application to implement a municipal regional district tax known as the MRDT. And the recommendation is to support the Regional District of Kootenay Boundaries application to the Ministry of Finance for the 2% municipal and regional district tax for the designated accommodation area that include the majority of the RDKB electoral areas C, D, and E, and the municipalities therein. And further, that if the support from the City of Greenwood or the Village of Midway is not forthcoming, the City of Grand Forks nonetheless supports the MRDT for a modified designated accommodation area, including RDKB area C and D and the City of Grand Forks. May I have a motion that we were at, or do we have anything else to talk about? So may I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Councilor Hammond, Councilor Thompson, discussion.
So I guess what we need to
Councilor Hammond.
decide is, I think that the concept in principle is good. I think it's going to help us promote tourism in the boundary region. The key is the boundary region because we're all tied together.
Usually,
And right now, as it stands, the only participants are, there are no participants west of Grand Forks. So I don't really have a problem. I just want everybody to realize that if we vote on this and we pass it, it's only going to include Grand Forks and Christina Lake at this point, because Greenwood and Midway are out. And it means that we're gonna be imposing that tax on our accommodators here, whether they voted for it or not.
Councilor Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through you, if I could have my memory refreshed, what was the percentage of accommodators in Grand Forks and in Christina Lake that voted in favor? And yeah, just that would be something that I just need to be aware of.
I'll pull it up.
Like a 62.
Yeah, 61% or something.
60, according to this, page 2 of 2, to date, we have 64% of accommodation and 60.9 of rooms across the boundary. Yeah, so.
Councilor Butler?
Yeah, I've kind of got mixed feelings about this too. I'm not really strongly for or against it. I'd like to have more than 61% to impose a tax on the area. Obviously, it's not going to go over well with some of the accommodators, and my goodness, don't we have enough taxes already? I mean, we're taxed on everything. I don't really like imposing another tax on people, even though I know we're saying it's not going to affect us, it's the people that travel through, and it's good for advertising. We're going to be advertising more, so there's benefits there, but I'm divided on it.
Councilor Thompson?
Well, in speaking in favor of the resolution, it is to promote the area, which is only going to benefit our businesses. It is not a tax that we are imposing and levying against our own constituents. It is a tax that is added on to the accommodations when someone stays overnight in one of our motels. And it's not unique to Grand Forks. It is a levy that is in charge in most or many other municipalities in the province. So I would support this.
Councilor Crowe?
Yeah, in Kevin's requested delegation, it says that we are surrounded by communities that are collecting tax and using it to promote themselves. So as the boundary country, we're not, right? So it leaves us at a bit of a disadvantage.
Councilor Hammond?
Yes, they have a destination marketing tax in Castlegar and Nelson. I know I paid it in Nelson. And I believe that when Cindy started this, she used a template working with the city, with Castlegar. I feel more comfortable seeing more documentation on how they've arrived at these numbers, because it doesn't tell us what the total revenue is that they're anticipating. I know that they have to pay 15% to the administrator of it, which is now going to be the Boundary Museum. And then the government, the provincial government takes its share of the taxes. Also, I was a little concerned when in the letter that was presented to us in December 14th, Committee of the Whole, it stated that they had formed a Boundary Country Tourism Steering Committee, which in fact, there was some doubt about, because when asked who was involved and who was on that committee, he said that there was politicians, but today none had been asked. So I have been at that meeting that had stakeholders from across the entire boundary, including Vicky G, right through Christina Lake, and none of us were approached to be on that tourism advisory committee, although we've been waiting. So the Boundary Regional Chamber of Commerce is going to take the initial lead to get that first meeting going, and then we'll decide who's going to chair it from there. But this is a regional thing that involves the whole region, and I'd like to see that advisory committee set up.
So maybe
But
best-
I'd like to see more documentation on the actual numbers, on what they're anticipating in revenue and how they determine that. Because there's nothing in here that tells us how much revenue they're anticipating or they're going to see.
So the question on the table, maybe we should defeat it and make a motion to get more information. Would you prefer
I would say
that?
so.
Councillor Ross?
Yeah, I'm anticipating they're gonna wanna go ahead with this right away as they start to ramp up for the next tourist season. And I know last year with the fires, a lot of the hotels and motels and parks in this area really suffered. And they're hoping to make up that revenue in the next year or two. I'm just concerned that if we, you know, whether we're asking to strike a committee or a committee to
No.
strike.
No, the committee,
task
they say
force?
has already been formed, but it hasn't, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I went to a meeting.
Yes, you went in my place,
I
but that
did.
was to the DMO, that was for the destination marketing,
Right.
which was a subcommittee. But that was before we even had this workshop.
Councillor Thompson?
You know, I hear Councillor Hammett's concerns with regard to the revenue generation, but having said that, that really has nothing to do with this council or this city. It's just that we are authorizing the levying of that 2% tax and how they market themselves with what's remaining after they've paid out the province and their administrator, really has nothing to do with us, but we're just saying, yeah, we support you going ahead with this, with the levying of this tax to promote our communities,
Grand Forks and Christina.
Grand Forks and Christina Lake. So regardless, I don't want to get into the minutia of how they're going to operate or what they're going to do with it. We're just saying, yes, we support the idea. I would, and I will support the idea of the hotel tax.
Well, all I can hope for is that if we support this and it gets started in Grand Forks, Christina Lake, that somewhere down the road, Greenwood and Midway will follow suit and come and join in on this, because right now, it's gonna eliminate them from the marketing and from, they won't be taxed.
So that's their choice.
Councillor Butler?
Through you, possibly to Councillor Hammett, because she seems to have a good handle on the information here. It says that, 64% of accommodations and 60.9% of rooms across the boundary are supporting it. So you said that Greenwood and Midway are out. So that 40% that turned it down, would that mainly be from Greenwood and Midway? And I'm just wondering how many of our accommodators here in Grand Forks, since that's who we represent, is the accommodators here in Grand Forks, are in support of it. I know you'd mentioned earlier before the meeting that one of our major accommodators wasn't in favor of it.
They were in and now they've pulled out. And I believe they sent a letter to the chamber, which I read that it wasn't, because I got forwarded that through email, that it wasn't what they were looking for, and they've decided that it wasn't going to work for them, so they've decided to decline their participation. I believe 64% of the accommodations, that number is, because I think this letter was written after Greenwood and Midway both refused to come on board.
So what's the percentage factor now?
I'm thinking 64% across both Christina Lake.
Well, eliminate Christina Lake, more so focused on our
I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, just so if I could, the boundary chamber is representative of our whole area. So I would, based on the fact that they haven't given us the numbers for our community, they're really looking for this from a broad perspective. So when it comes to that data, I don't know that we've had the specifics for Grand Forks.
only concern is because the Ramada has already declined, so.
Yeah, and it's a fair question.
Necessarily sending.
It's a fair question. If the other communities have pulled out, maybe our council would want to ask what is the percentage from Grand Forks? Because that's who you represent. And if you want to ask that question, and then bring it back to the next meeting, and then answer that.
I understand that they're in a hurry to get started on this. It's not gonna affect tourists that come regardless. It's just gonna affect if they're getting the revenue.
So we have a question on the table, so let's go with the question. So all in favor? All opposed? It's tied. So the motion failed. So can we have a motion then to
I'll make a motion that, as quickly as possible, get the information as to what the percentage of accommodations within the Grand Forks city limits that we represent are in favor of this 2% tax.
Point of order, whatever. So we've already defeated or negated the motion that dealt with this. What is the legality on bringing it back to the table?
Yeah,
You can bring it back?
Yeah, I can bring it back within 30 days. So right now, when we get this information ASAP, then we can bring it back to the table and,
At our next meeting.
Because they should have that information available to us at the next meeting. I mean, they should have that.
or a poll, but how many hotels do we have? Just poll the hotels.
Well, I think they've already pulled the hotels. That's, yeah.
And we've only got one that's,
We don't know.
see, so making a decision on, we have no.
We don't know how many in Grand Forks are in favor.
Exactly. Okay, so do
So
I have,
I'll make a resolution that we send it back to, Cabin Gates and ask that they give us a breakdown on the percentage of accommodators within Grand Forks city limits are in favor of this 2% tourist tax.
do I have a second? So, all in favor?
And this is to be come back to the 25th.
Okay, the motion is carried. To our chief corporate officer, did you get who opposed it? The previous motion was opposed by Councilor Hammond.
I'm not just motion, it looked like, I felt like it was,
Councilor Hammond
Council Hack, Council Butler.
and myself. Okay, moving along. Okay. May I have a motion to receive all the written reports from council as received?
We haven't received the letter from the chamber, regional chamber, don't we? Well, we dealt with the delegation, or is the
That was
part
part
of
of
it?
That's all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, now we're on item 6, which is the written reports. So may I have a motion to receive all the written reports from council? Councilor Hammond. Do I have a second? Councilor Butler. Discussion.
So, we had discussed in the earlier briefing about attendance for the LGLA, local government legislative,
Government leadership.
in Vancouver in February. And so I'm not sure whether we need to discuss it now or whether who wanted to participate and attend. I personally would like to attend. I think it's
I'd like to attend as well.
an educational, informative. And you said you would like,
Yeah.
possibly to meet.
Maybe we could have staff drop the letter come in and we'll present it for information purposes at our next meeting.
We haven't yet
Deadline is the
registered.
26th for booking.
So are you looking for a motion? Is that
I don't know what we need
for spending?
It was in the,
But it's in our budget.
Yeah, it was in the weekly information.
it was in the weekly summary.
Yeah.
And as far as it goes for council, we're on the budget, process, but they'll just be outlined in the overall council expenses we'll be talking about. We don't need a motion, just so council just want to talk about it's important to talk about UBCM, AKBLG, and when council's going to be attending those meetings, and for instance, with Councilor Ross attending the sustainability component, what the goals are, and then the reports coming back to council in that respect. So just for the community's information, and LGLA is an excellent process for our elected officials to learn in more depth more about their jobs. So it's a very, very worthwhile exercise.
Councilor Ross.
Yeah, I would love to have gone to the LGLA, but because I'm going to the Sustainable Communities Conference in Ottawa, I can't, obviously. But I think it's really important that those who do go, do bring what they have back. And even I would, rather than, heavy, dense written reports, I would like to see like at that time, a verbal report or a presentation of what, so we have shared learning. Because I think it's really important, because if I can't go, I want to hear what you've learned so that we all benefit from it. So I think beyond, in these cases, a nice little presentation, not everybody is comfortable with that, but those who are comfortable to do a 5 or 10 minute presentation on what they learned in the highlights. And also, if there's really good material there, is if you can collect extra copies to distribute to other council members. And I'll do the same when I'm
Absolutely.
on the sustainability.
I was going to request that.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm not doing that.
All right. Councillor Butler.
I just wanted to let the public know as well that there will be upcoming budget meetings that are open to the public. They're not regular council meetings, but they are on the 18th and 27th of January at 10 p.m. There's also
10 a.m.
Sorry, 10 a.m.
No, it's 10 p.m. to keep everybody out, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it'd be great if members of the public wanted to attend to see and see how we're going to be spending our money this year, be informative. I asked Mr. Johnson if he'd be able to film the meetings, but I don't know if he's available for all of them, so you'll have to come to the council chambers. I also wanted to compliment Councillor Ross on her report this week where she talked about the clear-cut logging up in Lynch Creek. I think that's something that we all need to be aware of, and there's a Facebook page for that as well. Save Lynch Creek, is that what it's called?
Save Lynch Creek North.
Save Lynch Creek North, and it details the huge cut that's going to be happening up there, which will definitely impact our watershed and our stream flows as we clear cut our forests. The water runs down a lot quicker in the spring, and then we dry up earlier in the summer. So it's something we can all pay attention to and have feedback to the provincial government on that as well. At the last meeting, Council passed a motion that I asked for the staff report on all legal expenses for 2015 with a breakdown of those expenses. It was mentioned to me today that unfortunately that won't be happening, and I was disappointed to hear that since Council had passed a motion on it, and I would just like to ask Council to uphold that motion. Unfortunately, there was no timeline attached to it, so it's been able to be put off possibly till May until I have access to any of that information. And as a council member, I think that's extremely disappointing that I don't have access to financials of the city when needed.
Councillor Hammond.
I'd just like to make a response to that. As we discussed earlier today, we have staff right now working on our annual year end and on our 2016 budget. And we can take them away from what they're doing now and put them onto this task, or we can wait until the annual report is completed, the annual year end is completed, and then those numbers will be available to us. So council decided that rather than take them away from their regular tasks, to have them proceed with what they're doing, and we'll see the results when they're done.
Councillor Butler.
Unfortunately, I don't believe that conforms with Robert's Rules of Order, that once council has passed a motion on something, it is the directive of staff to follow through on that motion that has been passed in an open public meeting.
Point of order, Councillor Butler. We're deviating from the motion that's on the table in regards to the written reports of council we received. Both Councillor, yourself and Councillor Hammond are deviating from the subject matter.
I just think that a precedent has been set at the last two meetings. Councillor Hammond has been able to give a verbal report to council, and I'm just asking for that same leeway for this little piece of information at this time.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I take exception to Councillor Butler's comment that staff is not complying with the resolution of council. There was no timeline given in the resolution, and our staff is complying and will be complying with that resolution as they compiled their accounts for the auditors at the year end. And furthermore, not all of the invoices for the month of December will have been received at this point in time. So any information that would be extracted would not be complete. So I would rather our staff give us the complete information, inclusive of all of 2015, rather than piecemeal here or piecemeal there. So I support what our staff is doing, and I see no issue, and I have no issue with waiting until all of the information has been received.
Councilor Butler, I'm going to give you a little more latitude, but if we discuss this any further, I will have to cut you off.
I was just hoping that with the city's aim for transparency, that transparency with council members regarding financial information might be a priority.
We have a question on the table, all in favor? So carried. Next item is the verbal report from the RDKV, which is myself, and there is no report due to the holidays. There was no real activity at the regional table. So we'll move on to the next item, which is recommendations from staff for decision from our Chief Financial Officer, subject matter, the Asset Management Financial Policy 808. Would you like to speak on that?
Should I introduce it?
You've already introduced it. I think it's just before council now for consideration.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to give a brief recap of the policy. Policy 808 would help us set some infrastructure reserves up to start saving towards replacing our infrastructure. And so it sets several different policies throughout the policy, several mini policies that helps guide us on putting money away into our infrastructure reserves. Two of the big goals for the policy are to try and get our annual investments up in our infrastructure up to 50% of the recommended value from previous engineering reports, and to try and get the minimum amount in the reserves of the priority 1 projects. So those are the two big goals of that. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation is council adopt policy 808, asset management financial policy. Do I have the mover? Councilor Thompson, Councilor Hammond. On this discussion, Councilor Butler.
Yeah, this policy was discussed at the committee of the whole meeting last month, so I won't go into detail on it. I just wanted to restate for the record that I am against following Asset Management BC's recommendations due to the fact that they're supported by private industry and their model follows the Australian model, which has led to privatization. I think council ought to be making their own policies. I think in principle, I mean, this is obviously important that we set money aside for asset renewal. That goes without saying. I'd also like to see our policies condensed. There's a lot of things in here that just go without saying that I really don't think need to be stated, and it could be cut down by a couple pages, maybe cut in half. The object of our communications policy is to have clear communications with the public, and I really don't think anybody's going to want to sit down and read a 5-page policy that could be stated a lot more succinctly. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councilor Butler. Councilor Thompson.
Well, I have a different position than Councilor Butler does on the policy, and I think it's excellent. I think it's very clear, it's very concise. It lays out it's not in a line item by line item, but in some detail of what it is that we're looking to do and the reasons behind it. And I'd like to compliment our staff on the preparation of this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Thompson. Moving on to our, we have to, there's a question.
So I was looking for the policy here, and maybe you can help me find where it was. It was talking about the sticking with a minimum 2% rate increase for taxes after the initial first 3 years adjustment period. Whereabouts in the policy was that stated? In the first 5 pages. Okay, anyways, my point being, I asked this question before, and I guess we haven't entered into that initial 3-year adjustment period, and then we're gonna level off at a 2% tax increase. I'm kind of concerned what that 3-year adjustment period looks. What does adjustment period look like? How much of an increase does that entail?
Garcia, Mr.
Mr. Mayor, that will be for council to consider over the next several meetings, what that's gonna look like. It always sits with council. Council may decide that they don't want to do it over a 3-year period because of the backlog of revenue that's going to be needed to do this. We don't have those final numbers yet, and they'll be presented to council. Once we have all those numbers, council will get the information and be able to look at that and be able to look at the effects of that. And that's why we've already entered into the first round of this process was exercising in cost savings. And now the next step will be understanding what the overall impacts are going to be to taxation based on the revenue matching our overall expenditures. So that information will be coming forward and it'll be open for the public to attend those meetings. And that will be part of that process to move us through discussion. And should council not like what they're hearing, based on the decisions that have been made in the past, they'll be able to direct staff around that.
That's right, policy driven.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the question's on the table, all in favor? All opposed? Motion's carried, Councilor Butler opposed. All right. Now, going to our information items from our Chief Administrative Officer. Subject matter is the presentation regarding 2015 year-end review.
So what we have here is just a brief recap for council and the community to talk about some of the key projects we've worked on this year as we just get this Prezi process sorted out. Here we are. So what we've done is within the presentation, we can start with asset management. We can talk about some of the key initiatives that our community worked on this year. We worked on gravel pit remediation. We've been developing the sludge management program, which is our biosolids in our sewage treatment pond. The water to sewer SCADA project upgrade, a backup generator installation at our data center, work yard tank fuel upgrades, library lighting upgrades, the headworks grinder replacement, which you'll see a video of how that operates in the budget process, but it's a really interesting piece and for efficiencies. It's actually removing an incredible amount of debris that would normally have gone into our sewer system works, but it's actually being separated. And interestingly enough, the conversation was, you should see this thing work. And it's really about separating all of the things you wouldn't normally see in the sewage treatment system. Riverside reconductor work, electrical system and voltage conversions, PCP management plan, and our reclosure controls. So that's just a few of the highlights around asset management this year. And you can see a couple of the pictures, the bleachers, and the controls on the backup generator system. We'll move on to the next component of this.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What's been done with the sludge management program?
So the sludge management program is being developed in respect to some of our options. We're looking at that. The report came to council identifying what our challenges were going to be. And now the next step is going to be moving into this budget year, how we're going to go about removing that. So council will be discussing that in the budget process. What do the options look like that are realistically going to work? We'll get an RFP out there as per our purchasing policy, and that'll be presented to council. And then the other component of that will be how do we dispose of the biosolids? We know that we're under a treaty agreement right now with First Nations for land application. What's our process going to look like? How much are we going to have to deal with, and where are we going to put it? The question always is, not in my backyard ever. There's going to be processes we're going to have to look at when it comes to disposing of the biosolids. But our first steps are going to be taking it out, drying it, minimizing its overall impact, and then looking for the land application. But there's a plan in place.
I was just wondering what we've done on it this year, because it was in our update that it's been dealt with this year, so what has already been done?
So the report was done, and then the planning process is being done for the budgeting for moving it forward for this year, coming this year. Okay, but it's a big undertaking when we talk about that because it has a major impact on our treatment process and our room and our viability moving forward because we start right now, for those that don't know this, but we have to start lowering our sewage treatment ponds now for fresh end runoff. We start now lowering them so we have capacity for stormwater entering into our system. So there is quite a bit of work that goes with that. And I wouldn't want to underestimate the value of the work that goes into that. We talked a little bit about economic development. Some of the things that we've done, marketing with an external audience. We have a booth that happens at the Vancouver Giants game, so we're marketing families and demographics in our area where we're going to be we've been working with the business community, the the Boundary Chamber of Commerce in respect to advertising for employers that are potentially looking for folks to come to our community. So we have a booth set up there, and we're very high profile at the Vancouver Giants game. We have participated in the provincial nominee program. So that's the offshore investors that are looking to potentially acquire businesses. It's a provincial program. Our information's out there, and we've seen significant responses to that, inquiries. Stakeholder advisory roundtable, and strengthen our business industry community relations. We've been meeting with our business such as Roxol, such as the fabrication company here, Unifab, and their work with the city, and understanding what the city can do for them and what we can do in partnership. So it was a productive year this year. Moving on to the next piece. For those who remember the wildfires that we had this year, the summer was consumed by wildfires, and you can see that we're just learning how to use this presentation process. I'm doing a little bit better, but the fire this year consumed a considerable amount of our staff time and resources going into this. And this was an unforeseen event. We didn't budget for this. We didn't plan for this. And at the end of the day, it consumed probably 6 weeks of pretty much full-time staff time going into addressing this when it comes to the EOC, the cleanup, the reporting, the occupational health and safety components related to this. So there was a considerable amount of work.
Are we reimbursed by the province for some of that?
So the answer to that question, Mr. Mayor, when we have things that are covered through the PEP program, yes. So we do get reimbursed. If we acted outside of that, from the declaration happening, with our council undertook the declaration, all of our expenses were recovered. So that was a positive for us that came from that. And great response and great community participation. The pictures that we had from the attendance at the community at the high school was an incredible turnout. It was an incredible community response. And positive responses all the way through and through. And we're still not done with this. There's still cleanup and stuff happening in Area E and beyond when it comes to some of the metals and stuff that we're talking about still.
46 floor replacements, I think, along
Yeah.
33.
It's a long process
Yeah.
for dealing with this. The next piece that we talked about was our acquisition of our new ladder truck came in this year. Significant purchase for our community. Obviously a very nice piece of equipment, very resourceful. And that's been delivered now. And that was close to $1 million purchase for the city. Next
And
one.
again, I would like to compliment our CFO on her astuteness in locking in the money
Yes,
for that.
she saved us approximately $200,000 by thinking ahead. So by securing the American dollar when it was there. So always nice work she does.
Way to go.
Community livability. Some of the things that our councils worked on this year was the acquisition and development of the Rotary Spray Park, the grant that we acquired for the playground upgrades, James Donaldson bleacher repairs, the airport beacon grant that we acquired. That work's going to be underway shortly. We've been working on the expansion plan, looking at understanding how we can expand the hangars down there. We finished off the downtown beautification that was approved by council, just some minor housekeeping there. The water metering program, going to be complete this year. The electric car charging station has been installed, and we're going to see the painting of the stalls and the signs coming out in the spring. The Learning Garden project, a significant project for our community, and the Selkirk Mural project was highly successful. Community engagement, EOC, was just an example of communications in our community and how fast the communications happens. Strategic planning, the long-term plans set by council, the water meter open house, school district 51, the work that the students were doing on water in our community and the problem-based learning, great workshop, and drinking water week, which we're looking on expanding on this year by having a public works week day, incorporating the fire department and potentially the RCMP to share knowledge about our resources and other aspects of our community. So it is about engaging everybody in the community to understand some of the services that we offer. And Family Day coming up was again last year, which was it's in the other events that we have, but our Family Day event is up and coming. So as we move into community support and some of the other things, we'll talk about the parade and stuff, but arts and cultural support, these are some of the other things that the council supports. Your Gallery 2, the Boundary Arts Council, the Boundary Tennis Club, Music in the Park, Cricket in the City, the Harvest Festival, the Rotary Halloween Bonfire, Rotary Spring Park, the Chamber, Fee for Service, the Farmers Market, minor baseball, the slow pitch, the Remembrance Day, Selkirk Mural Project, and the Learning Garden. So again, the learning and the arts and cultural component that our council supports in this community is pretty significant. Next one. It is our first track of this. Let's move up to community support. So we talked a little bit about the Community Support Family Day. Our Family Day event is going to be bigger and better this year. There's going to be a fit challenge in the street, so there'll be almost not a tough mudder because there's no mud. It'll be a winter event that will involve all age groups. The Fall Fair, even though it was canceled this year, a significant amount of work that our council allocates to that. Canada Day, the GFI, the Relay for Life, Rob's Ride, the bonfire, the airport appreciation, and the fly-in, the Christmas light-up, Santa Claus parade. CanadaFest. So this is, and it's so much, and we have up here the CanadaFest, the GFI, and you can see the snapshots of some of them, the Park in the Park. It's an incredible amount of events that our community supports through council that when council approves it, our staff undertakes the planning with the volunteers to do this. And there's so many volunteer hours that go into this. So again, it's a celebration of all the different things that our community does. But I think it's often overlooked because we go from council meeting to council meeting, and we don't remember how much work really goes into this. And we talk about successes, and these are some of the considerable successes that we have. CanadaFest is out already with their plan for next year. Moving on to our fiscal responsibility. We move into this year. We received $375,000 in grants, or close to $375,000. Our asset management and work software installation process with our public works stuff. So that's ongoing right now, but it's in the works, and we're getting closer with that. And we're going to do a demonstration for council in the coming months of how that's working. Well, obviously, we review our tax portion mixes, reviewing of our services, and one of the big things that was undertaken this year is the revamping of our chart of accounts in the finance department, which is a big undertaking, but it smooths out the process for our departments and their managers. And then obviously our PSAB requirements, which is our Public Sector Accounting Board requirements under PSAB 3160, we're required to inventory all of our contaminated sites, and we're going to have to invest into that process, and we're going to have to determine if those sites are contaminated. So when we talk about the desktop work that some of our staff are doing, just as an aside, when PSAB brings this out, our staff then has to go to work. We don't have a choice. We have to do it. Now, once we do that, that can result in significant staff time as a result of that. So again, this is some of our fiscal or financial responsibility pieces, and I believe that's there's one more piece up top with our development. An interesting area this year. This year we have our land development showcase, which resulted in one property sale. So it was I think we invested close to $15,000 at the time, which resulted in a net return of $120,000 for our community. We've had 13 inquiries on our city-owned property, probably a few more than that, but 13 serious inquiries, 26 development inquiries in 2015, 17 rezoning requirements, 14 development variance permits, land sales, and the PMP program and the Urban Development Institution. So when we talk about is our process working? Absolutely. It's just getting the message out there to the community and beyond that we are open for business and we are doing some things. And council to know that this is working. Yes, your land sales now, that just in that one piece of property has generated taxation that you weren't getting before, which may spur on that other developer to do further things, but they're paying taxes to the city, whereas we owned the property before it was a cost to us. So, and it was a piece of industrial property, which is, I believe, around $20 for every 1,000 they're assessed. So again, it's a big chunk of money coming into the city. So that is success. So what does success look like? I mean, this overall is an example of success. Our council had a very good year. We talked about financial position. We talked about the grant amounts that we acquired this year and the community participation. And hopefully this year will even be a more beneficial to our community overall with some of the grants that we're looking for moving into the remainder of 2016. So just as a reminder for council, it's important for us to reflect back on some of the important on the work that we've done and appreciate it all because it is a blur and I think oftentimes it's overlooked. Oh, development. With development, we had 39 building inspections. We had 44 building permits issued, equaling $1.53 million in construction value. So again, that's positive for us. And 48 bylaw-related complaints that we respond to. So our processes are valuable for our community, and it is working for us. Our bylaw officer is responding to complaints and issues and resolving them. We're not issuing tickets. We're trying to be that voice of reason to make sure that we're not getting into a position where we're just simply finding people, or we're trying to find resolve some issues. So again, Mr. Mayor, that's just a bit of a snapshot of your first year in council, and the actions that council makes, the decisions you make at this table are reflected in a lot of the things that you see before you. So that's just before you first see for information.
Okay, so may I have a motion to receive the presentation from our CAO regarding the 2015 year in review? Councillor Thompson. Councillor Hammond. If there's no discussion, all in favor? So carried. Moving on to our bylaws, from our Chief Financial Officer, subject matter, bylaw 2019, the City of Grand Forks 2016 revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw. The recommendation is that council gives final reading to the bylaw 2019 City of Grand Forks revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw 2016. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Butler, Councillor Thompson. All in favor? So carried. Our Manager of Operations, subject matter, Water Regulations Bylaw number 1973-A1. The recommendation is that council gives final reading to the Water Regulation Bylaw number 1973-A1. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hammett. All in favor? All opposed? Councillor Butler. Motion is carried. To our Manager of Building Inspection and Bylaw Services, subject matter, amendment bylaw number 1957-A4 as it relates to Schedule 4 of the Municipal Ticketing and Information Bylaw number 1957, and it's in regards to the unsightly premise bylaw number 1962. The recommendation is that council considers giving first three readings to the amendment bylaw number 1957-A4. This bylaw makes reference to Schedule 4 of the Municipal Ticketing and Information Bylaw number 1957 in relation to the unsightly premise bylaw number 1962. May I have a mover? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Crog. All in favor? So carried. There are no late items, so we'll move on to questions from the public and the media. May I again please caution the public to only discuss subject matter that has been dealt with this evening.
Your Worship, good evening, Your Worship, Councillors. My name is Nigel James. I rise on the subject. In fact, it wasn't specifically mentioned, excepting that it was in the minutes of previous meetings. And this concerns the, we'll call the recycling dumpsters or recycling bins behind the fire hall. Are you willing to hear any comments about these, please?
Considering it's not on this evening's agenda, but I will give you a slight bit of latitude on it.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. It's included in the minutes of the previous meetings and so on, so therefore it is part of this evening's meeting, in fact. The situation really regarding the dumpsters, I call them dumpsters, it was in the press release given by the city, it said that they're well used and they're popular. The chairman of the RDKB board, Mrs. Grace McGregor, feels that it's a duplication of facilities. Maybe there is need to have a duplication of facilities because if they're well used, obviously they're used. And part of the job I would suggest of the RDKB and of the city is provide services to the public and services that are required and needed and keep the city running smoothly. When those bins go, people will have to go up to the landfill site in order to get rid of extra rubbish and so on. There is also the problem of glass. Glass is not picked up by the contractor, and the glass will have to be taken up there. That is fine for those who have cars and are willing to do it. Some people don't have cars. And what is going to happen is I saw on the news actually about 3 days ago in Surrey. I think we're going to go into, and I hope not, but I think we're going to go into a fly tipping type of situation. And I hope that the CFO has got a budget line organized for the costs of budgeting for the removal of waste that will be no doubt thrown around, because I'm afraid human nature being human nature, they will not go up to some will, but some will not. And that's the big problem. Currently now, there is an additional slight snag, and that is that thermo softening plastic basically should not be put into the recycling bins that is picked up by the contractor. Only thermo hardening plastic. So thermo softening plastic, people should have to take it up to the RDKB dump itself. That and extended polystyrene, glass, paint and other things, and I must admit the dump is run pretty well, there's no doubt about that, considering what it functions. But we are getting into a situation that I'm afraid a lot of people will have problems of getting rid of some of their waste. Batteries to certain places, fluorescent tubes to certain places, and so the list goes on. There really needs to be some sort of serious thought put together to know how we can be, shall we say, proactive in the recycling situation so that it keeps everybody happy. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you for your comments. Just to comment briefly on that, as I'm well aware, you're a very intelligent man. You are aware that the RDKB handles all of these containers. It's not the cities. But addressing the glass issue, this is something that we can look into, the contractor. But as you mentioned, batteries, etc., hopefully those would not have been dumped in the first place, because if those containers are contaminated, we would be responsible for the cleanup. So in many municipalities now, there are no recycling bins or dumpsters, as you call them, in the downtown core. So it's a process on the other issues that you mentioned, like batteries and disposable. They have to go to the waste site in any event.
May I sort of correct you there? Sorry, Your Worship. Batteries actually one of the places is go to the source. Mm-hmm. And fluorescent lights to Home Hardware on 68th or 72nd Street.
It's only because you had mentioned that in conjunction.
Oh, sorry, okay. People might not quite agree with your kind comments about being intelligent on my part.
I'll second it.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I went to a meeting on solid waste management before I was elected to council, and one of the things that I brought up is that there needs to be a one-stop shop for people that want to dispose of their recyclables. And the comeback that I received was that, well, there's a cost, it's too expensive. So my comeback on that one was, well, then it's going to end up in areas, in Area D, or Area E, or Area C, in the back roads where people are just going to get fed up and they're just going to start disposing it. So these things can be done, but they're not cheap. So, perhaps when at some point in the future we can ask for a costing on what it would be to be able to have all of these batteries and fluorescent tubes and paints and oils and all of the things that people have to dispose of in one place, so that you're not having to run around and increase our carbon footprint, as it were, by having to go to all of these different places. So I appreciate what your concerns are, and I share them.
And possibly we could have the same done like in other communities like Kelowna, where they have it once every couple of months. There's a day where you can bring your paints and items to a certain place, that's a possibility too. So there's many options that we can look into, but leaving the recycling bins is not one of them.
However, may I make a minor comment, and we've got 2.5 weeks to go before it's going to happen.
Thank you. Any questions? Gentlemen to the back.
Les Johnson, GFTV. This isn't really about a question about anything on council. I was just, in case the public wasn't aware of it, for you councilors, as you deliberate on things over the next year, just to imagine that Roy Ronigan is sitting there looking over your shoulder. He won't be in council meetings obviously anymore because he's passed on.
Yeah, rest in peace, Roy.
Yeah, we're missing already.
Great loss.
Any other questions from the gallery or the meeting? Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn? Councilor Hammond? And second, Councilor Thompson. All in favor? Carried.